A lot of people complain that After Effects does not contain its own three-way color corrector. Well, actually it does, it just has a terrible user interface. It's called the color balance effect. Color balance allows you to adjust the red, green, and blue channels individually in the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. These are overlapping ranges of pixel values that control how an image looks, and you can go ahead and create all sorts of custom adjustments, give the shadows a particular deep, say, purple tint, or give the highlights a bit of a warm reddish tint, or you can use this to remove color cast from an image. So I'm going to show you primarily how to use color balance to neutralize color cast in an image, then touch on some of the creative applications of it at the end. Here I have a piece of archival footage with some sepia or reddish tints in it. I'd like to neutralize those tints either to get back to a very clean, well-balanced image, or to use as a starting point for more creative adjustments. Now I notice it's also a bit underlit. It's looking a little bit dark and dingy. I like to maximize the contrast in my images whenever I can before I start working on them, so I know I have a good range of white to black values. A couple ways of doing that. I can apply color correction levels and manually pull up my black point to the bottom of the histogram, pull down my white point to the top of the histogram, scroll my time marker and make sure that those upper and lower limits hold pretty well for the whole shot, and they do. Or I can take advantage of an effect called Effect, Color Correction, Auto Contrast, and have it do these adjustments for me automatically. So now I've got a good full dynamic range image. Twirl up Auto Contrast, and select Effect, Color Correction, Color Balance. And you'll see that I've got controls for shadow, red, green, and blue balance. That means I can add or subtract to those values. Midtone, red, green, and blue. Highlight, red, green, and blue. Now these are not distinct zones. They actually overlap quite a bit. When I adjust the shadow, it will have some effect on the midtones. When I adjust the midtones, it will have some effect on the highlights and on the shadows. So this is going to be an iterative process to dial in the colors that I want. Now while working with color balance, I'm going to be looking at color values throughout the image. And the tool for that is the info panel, Command or Control 1 to open. I want to be able to read RGB values as I hover my cursor over different parts of this image. And I'll be using this as an inset throughout this video so you can see what's going on. Okay, let's start with the blackest and whitest parts of this image because the shadows and the highlights don't overlap that much, so therefore affecting black and white won't affect each other that much. Starting with the black, I've got a couple dark areas here. I have this eyepiece, which is showing me in general that the red values are a bit hotter, the green and blue, and green is a little bit lower than the blue channel. His tie is also very black, and as I drag through it, it's actually quite balanced in the black range. If anything, it's showing me that the green is still a little bit weak here and there. So to balance my blacks, I'm probably going to increase my greens just a little bit here, just so I have values in the tie a bit more even. A little bit more, such as maybe 4. And then let's look at his eyepiece. I've got the green a little bit closer and the red a bit hot. Let's go ahead and pull the red balance down about 4 and increase the green to 5. And as I drag through now, I'm getting a lot more similar values for the red, green, and blue in this eyepiece. And the tie is also staying fairly well matched. The red might be a little darkened through here. We'll come back and tweak that later. Now let's look at whites in the image. This headband is very white, and as I drag my cursor through it, I see that the green channel is lacking a little bit here as well. And let's look at his collar. Again, green's a little bit weak, and his shirt and shirt sleeve, green's a little bit below red and blue. So in the highlights, let's pump up the green balance by 3 for starters. As I look through here, I'm closer. Let's go a little bit higher. Now I'm getting a much better balance between red, green, and blues in the highlights in this image. They're pretty equal. So I'll stick with that for now. Now let's adjust my midtones. And I'm lucky that in this image, this wall is supposed to be presenting me with a black to white gradient. Try to find a good neutral gray somewhere in your image. I'm going to drag around and look for values around 128 or so. As I get around here, I'm seeing that my reds are hot and my blues are a bit underrepresented, while my greens are pretty good here in the midtones. So let's go ahead and lower the red balance by, say, -15 to start, and bump up the midtone blues by, say, about 10 to start. You can see already that's had a big effect on balancing out this image. Now as I drag to something closer to 128 for all these, I see that I'm pretty darn close. Blue could come up a little bit, red could come down a smidgen. So let's go ahead and increase the blues to 15 and lower the red balance just a little bit, minus 17. And now I'm seeing pretty darn even midtones. If I had to push it, I would again just keep tweaking a little bit more with a little bit more blue balance, such as 17. And now I've got a fairly well balanced grayscale. And this was before and after. You can see we've really neutralized the shifts in this image. Now at this point, you should not think that you're done. You should always go back and recheck your earlier work. For example, let's look at those blacks again. This eyepiece is now showing the blues are very hot. Increasing the blues in the midtones has increased the blues in the shadows as well. As I look in this tie, I see that that's also hot as well. Let's go into the shadow balance and remove blues from the shadows. Okay, we're a little bit more even on the tie there. A little bit more even on the eyepiece. If anything, green's a little hot, red's a little low. So I'm going to go ahead and restore some of my red balance and pull back some of my green adjustment. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more even of the setting. Red's still a little underrepresented. Let's look at the eyepiece. These are looking pretty darn even. If anything, again, I might pull green back a little bit and pull red back a little bit as well. Much better balance. I'm happy with the blacks. Now let's go look at the whites. Headband, pretty even. Green maybe a little bit hot. Let's go ahead and look at this collar. Same thing, green's a bit hot. So now we pull the green balance back out because we had increased it in the midtones. Look at my midtones, and I'm seeing now that the reds have gotten back hot again. That's because I've increased my reds and my shadows. So let's pull back the red midtones even further, say minus 25. Now as I drag through, I'm finding pretty good color balance in there. Pretty darn good. Green's a little underrepresented, so let's just go ahead and pump that up a little bit. I'll double check my blacks. Pretty good. Check my whites. Pretty good. Now I have a balanced image. This was before, and this was after. Now there's one more interesting button inside color balance. It's called Preserve Luminosity. When you make all these adjustments of increasing or decreasing different values, you may have adjusted the overall brightness or balance of the image. Preserve Luminosity is an attempt to automatically rebalance the overall luminance in the image. And you'll see it has very little effect on here. It has more dramatic effect on other images. Frankly, I use this very sparingly. Sometimes it overcorrects to my taste. You can always use something like auto contrast to restore contrast when you're done.